Jack the Ripper. The Whitechapel murders attributed to Jack the Ripper were characterized by extreme brutality and surgical precision. The killer targeted female sex workers in impoverished areas of London's East End, specifically focusing on the Whitechapel district. Between August and November of 1888, 5 women fell victim to the Ripper's gruesome attacks. The Ripper's modus operandi involved slashing the throats of his victims before subjecting them to extensive abdominal mutilations. These mutilations demonstrated a level of anatomical knowledge that fueled speculation about the killer's background. The removal of specific organs, such as the uterus or kidneys, was performed with a degree of skill that suggested medical training or experience in handling flesh. The precision of these mutilations led to various theories about the killer's identity and motives. Some speculated that the Ripper was a surgeon, possessing the necessary anatomical knowledge to perform such precise cuts. Others theorized that he might have been a butcher, skilled in the art of dismemberment. The removal of specific organs also sparked debates about possible ritualistic motivations or a deeper psychological compulsion driving the murders. The murders occurred during a time of rapid expansion in popular journalism, and newspapers capitalized on the public's morbid fascination with the crimes. The very name Jack the Ripper originated from a letter allegedly sent by the killer to the Central News Agency, though its authenticity remains debated. Newspapers competed for readers with lurid headlines and graphic descriptions, often embellishing details or publishing unverified information. This sensationalized coverage not only heightened public fear, but also complicated the police investigation by generating a flood of false leads and misinformation. Ted Bundy. Between 1974 and 1978, Bundy is believed to have murdered at least 30 young women across several states, including Washington, Utah, Colorado, and Florida. His methods were calculated and cruel, often involving feigning injuries or posing as an authority figure to lure women to isolated areas. Once alone with his victims, he subjected them to brutal sexual assaults before murdering them. Bundy's actions were driven by a deep-seated desire for control and power, fueled by sadistic sexual fantasies. The full extent of Bundy's depravity included engaging in necrophilia, often returning to the bodies of his victims. This behavior, coupled with the volume of his crimes, places Bundy among the most disturbing serial killers in criminal history. Bundy's ability to evade capture was notable. His first arrest in 1975 for a traffic violation led to him being linked to a series of missing women. However, Bundy managed to escape custody twice before his final apprehension in Florida in 1978. These escapes added to his notoriety and the public's fascination with his case. The subsequent trial garnered significant media attention, with Bundy often attempting to control his own defense. His charisma and intelligence were on full display, even as the evidence of his horrific crimes mounted. Bundy was ultimately convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to death. On January 24, 1989, he was executed in the electric chair in Florida. John Wayne Gacy. The true extent of Gacy's crimes came to light in December 1978, following the disappearance of 15-year-old Robert Piest. A police investigation led to a shocking discovery: human remains buried in the crawlspace beneath Gacy's home. Investigators ultimately found the bodies of 26 victims in this confined space, with additional remains discovered on Gacy's property and in nearby rivers. Gacy's victims were primarily young men and boys. His method of luring victims often involved offering them jobs or promising money. The brutality of his actions, combined with the sheer number of victims, made Gacy one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. The case against Gacy culminated in his trial in 1980, where he confessed to the murders but pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. The court proceedings revealed the full extent of his crimes, raising questions about how such atrocities could have gone undetected for so long. Gacy's ability to maintain a double life demonstrated the chilling capacity of some individuals to compartmentalize their actions and evade suspicion. Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer, born in 1960, committed his first murder at the age of 18, but it wasn't until 1991 that the full extent of his atrocities came to light. Dahmer's childhood was marked by feelings of isolation and abandonment, particularly after his parents' divorce. This emotional turmoil is believed to have contributed to his later disturbing behaviors. Between 1978 and 1991, Dahmer is known to have murdered 17 young men. His method of luring victims involved approaching them in gay bars or public places, offering money for photographs or inviting them for drinks at his apartment. Once isolated, he would drug his victims with sedatives mixed into alcoholic beverages before subjecting them to brutal assaults and murder. Dahmer's crimes extended beyond killing. He engaged in acts of necrophilia and cannibalism, dismembering bodies and keeping parts as trophies or consuming them in a disturbing attempt to create compliant zombies. Dahmer would drill holes into the skulls of drugged victims, injecting them with acid or boiling water. These experiments invariably resulted in death, demonstrating the extreme nature of his psychological disturbance. The impact of Dahmer's crimes profoundly affected the LGBTQ+ community, particularly in Milwaukee. Many of his victims were young men from marginalized backgrounds, and his actions contributed to heightened fears and stigmas, especially in the context of the AIDS crisis of the 1980s and early 1990s. Dahmer's reign of terror ended in July 1991 when an intended victim escaped and alerted police. Upon entering Dahmer's apartment, officers discovered evidence of his crimes, leading to his immediate arrest. The subsequent investigation revealed the full horror of Dahmer's actions, raising unsettling questions about the nature of evil and the failings of the criminal justice system. Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, terrorized Southern California in the mid-1980s with a series of brutal attacks that claimed at least 14 lives and involved numerous sexual assaults. His crimes were characterized by their randomness and extreme violence, targeting victims ranging from young children to elderly couples. Ramirez's troubled upbringing in El Paso, Texas, is believed to have significantly influenced his criminal behavior. He was exposed to violence and drug use from an early age, including graphic stories and photographs of wartime atrocities shared by his Vietnam War veteran cousin. This early exposure to extreme violence is thought to have desensitized Ramirez and contributed to his later crimes. The Night Stalker's attacks typically involved breaking into homes at night, often sexually assaulting his victims before murdering them. This unpredictability heightened the terror experienced by the public, as no one felt safe from his reach. Ramirez incorporated satanic symbolism into his crimes, leaving pentagrams and other occult symbols at crime scenes and forcing some victims to swear to Satan. This element reflected his interest in Satanism and intensified the fear he instilled in the community. Media coverage of the Night Stalker case was extensive, dominating headlines and turning Ramirez into a notorious figure before he was even identified. In August 1985, Ramirez's reign of terror came to an end when his fingerprints were found at a crime scene and a surviving victim provided a description: Andre Chikatilo. In 1978, Chikatilo began a killing spree that would last until 1990, targeting women and children across the Soviet Union. His crimes were characterized by extreme violence, including stabbing, mutilation, and even acts of cannibalism. These horrific acts were believed to be driven by a combination of deep-seated anger and sexual frustration, which Chikatilo attributed to feelings of powerlessness in other aspects of his life. The investigation into Chikatilo's crimes faced significant challenges unique to the Soviet system. The lack of advanced forensic technology and the initial reluctance of authorities to acknowledge the existence of serial killers in Soviet society hindered progress. These systemic issues allowed Chikatilo to continue his murderous activities despite being questioned multiple times. The breakthrough came in November 1990 when undercover officers observed Chikatilo approaching children at a train station. This led to his arrest and subsequent interrogation, during which forensic evidence finally linked him to several murders. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Chikatilo confessed to killing 56 people. Chikatilo's trial in 1992 exposed the full extent of his atrocities. He was ultimately convicted of 52 murders, placing him among the most prolific serial killers in history. Pedro Alonso Lopez. Lopez's criminal activities began with car theft, leading to his incarceration. During his time in prison, he claimed to have been gang raped, an experience that likely contributed to his later violent tendencies. Upon release, Lopez began a killing spree across Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador during the 1970s and early 1980s. The extent of Lopez's crimes is difficult to verify, but he claimed to have murdered over 300 girls, primarily between the ages of 9 and 12. His modus operandi involved luring young girls from busy markets or streets before subjecting them to sexual assault and strangulation. Lopez's motivations appeared to stem from a deep-seated hatred of women, rooted in his childhood experiences. Lopez was captured in 1980 when caught attempting to abduct abduct a young girl in Ecuador. He confessed to his crimes and led authorities to the graves of 53 of his victims. Lopez was convicted of murdering 110 girls in Ecuador and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, in 1994, after serving only 14 years, he was released due to Ecuador's maximum sentence law. Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos is recognized as one of the most notorious female serial killers in American history. Born in 1956, Wuornos experienced a tumultuous childhood characterized by abuse, abandonment, and placement in a home for troubled children at a young age. These traumatic experiences are believed to have significantly influenced her later behavior and criminal actions. As an adult, Wuornos turned to sex work for survival, exposing her to violence and exploitation. Between 1989 and 1990, she committed a series of murders, killing 7 men in Florida. Wuornos' actions challenged societal perceptions of female criminality and raised complex questions about the intersection of victimization and perpetration of violence. The case of Aileen Wuornos is characterized by her claims of self-defense, asserting that her victims had attempted to rape or assault her. This narrative complicated public understanding of her crimes and sparked discussions about the dangers faced by sex workers and the potential for trauma-induced violence. The case highlighted the complex interplay between victimhood and criminal behavior, challenging conventional notions of serial killers. Wuornos' capture in 1991 led to a high-profile legal process that drew attention to issues of gender, violence, and the criminal justice system's treatment of female offenders.